Hey everybody, Jamin here from Game Show. So you might have caught the news that Mojang pulled back the curtain on Minecraft Story Mode last weekend at Minecon. Surprise, surprise, it looks very similar to Telltale Games' other recent adventure games like The Walking Dead and Game of Thrones, some of which are some of my favorite games of all time. So for the new Minecraft game, for Minecraft Story Mode, they even went so far to say that a team of writers were inspired by retro 80s movies like Ghostbusters and Goonies. And the result is that people who play a lot of Minecraft seem to be kind of divided on whether this is a type of game that they ultimately want to see emerge from the Minecraft ecosystem. So I think Minecraft Story Mode is an interesting test case in terms of the ways that we think about games, because it lends itself very well to a discussion that's been going on for years and years and years now about how things like cutscenes and cinematics actually add, or in some cases detract from what a game is, or ultimately what a game could be. So there's two different views on the subject. One is that game creators author content. They make a lot of assets and write a story and so on and so on. Game creators are completely in control, and players on the other end of the spectrum consume that content, which is the approach that we see with Minecraft Story Mode. In the player choice episode that I did, I talked about the idea that even in games with multiple different paths like Telltale's, you still follow the same narrative flow chart. Ultimately, there's decisions that you can make, but most of the decisions that you make in the game aren't life and death decisions. They sort of make small tweaks, but they don't really determine the long-term outcomes of what it is that you do. The other end of the spectrum are people who believe that games speak through mechanics, through the tools and the rules that sort of govern your behavior inside that universe, and that's something that we see in the original Minecraft. So, a really notable example. For example, creepers are programmed to sneak up behind you and blow things up. That is something that exists in the game. There doesn't have to be sort of a narrative layer on top of that. That's just a sort of a rule that exists in this particular system and governs a particular outcome for you when you play Minecraft. So interestingly enough, there's actually a design philosophy which sort of explains these two particular poles. So, on the one hand, you sort of have the rules, and on the other hand, you sort of have the narrative structure. So it's a system called MDA. It was designed by it was a paper that was co-published by Robin Hunicke, who was the producer on Journey, who I interviewed obviously a couple weeks ago, Mark LeBlanc, who actually is someone we actually talked about in What Type of Player Are You episode, and another fellow named Robert Zubek. So mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics, it says that there's basically this spectrum. One way to think about it is that mechanics are a really good way of keeping people, but a terrible way of attracting people, and aesthetics are a great way of attracting people, but a terrible way of keeping people. So mechanics are the rules of the game, and they give rise to what are called dynamics, which is how you interact with the game, and this leads to an aesthetic, which is your particular feeling towards a game. And so what's interesting is that you sort of see Minecraft and Telltale sort of exist on opposite ends of the spectrum, in the sense that Minecraft, it doesn't really have a strong story layer, but it's all about these sort of rules that exist in the system, and Telltale has a strong narrative layer, one that's sort of designed to evoke particular feelings inside of you. The disagreement comes because I think that Minecraft, part of the appeal and part of the reason why it was so popular in Let's Play communities, it was popular with modders and so on, is because it had these characteristics of things that only games can do. To be fair, this isn't a problem that just exists in the world of games. Every medium has its own particular niche, its own particular way of doing things. So, for instance, comics tell stories in many unique ways that other mediums can't. So, cartoonist Scott McCloud has written an excellent book called Understanding Comics, and he talks about the length of a panel can, for example, denote the passage of time, and also the space between the panel gives the reader the ability to fill in gaps in the story with your imagination, and a good cartoonist plays to these strengths. And so you look at a cartoonist like someone like Chris Ware, for example, there's someone who really could only be telling a story in that particular medium. Likewise, with games, what makes a game like Minecraft great is that it takes advantage of things that only video games can do. It has specific strengths that are unique to video games. So Minecraft stories will, in all likelihood, be quality stuff, because as we know, Telltale makes a lot of great games, and they put a lot of love and care into it. But there's also sort of this fear, which I understand, which is that you lose a lot of the ability that makes Minecraft ultimately unique, even though it's just called story mode. So at its heart, and this is the question I would have for you all, what is Minecraft at the end of the day? Is it the iteration that people sort of love and enjoy, that has this like open-ended nature to it and this big world of exploration, or is it just sort of an ecosystem out of which other types of stories, such as Minecraft Story Mode, can ultimately emerge? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I will see you all in a bit.